from the point at which Michael Saylor started buying Bitcoin until last year, he had a good run where there's like zero competition. We saw that shift last year with Semler and everything else coming out. Like they're just normal company CEOs that have decided to implement a Bitcoin strategy playbook written by Michael Saylor. And that took some time. And even then, it's not in a big way. Actually, today, Rumble CEO announced they bought a number of Bitcoin. I forgot the number, but that's another big one too, that if it materializes in a big way, it's gonna take a lot of supply off the market. But I think GameStop is also looking at it too, right? The CEO of GameStop is seriously looking at Bitcoin adoption. But it just needs some more traction. And I think it's the same for nation states. And we're just starting to re-engage now after the SBR executive order and talk to the politicians and governments again, but with this new information, because we as Bitcoiners are still in an echo chamber. Normal people don't know. Last night we had a call with a former head of state in this country, and we had to tell them that. About all these things that we're talking about in this podcast. So it's almost like we're just relaying the news because it's not always what they're paying attention to. So I would say this year we're going to see some movement, if not a lot of movement, on actual bigger countries adopting Bitcoin in some way, or at least starting to.
Do you want to re-explain what is a Veblen good and a Veblen threshold?
Right. So a Veblen good is you could call it a luxury good. It's valuable because it's expensive and it's a sign of prestige and wealth. And, you wouldn't pay, you don't want to pay less for an LV bag. You want to pay more and signal the wealth. And this is like applicable to anything like luxury cars and phones to a lesser extent and, fashion. So a Veblen effect is just taking that and extrapolating that concept and applying it to Bitcoin, whereby there is like a threshold at which Bitcoin crosses this, and now it is like the new gold. And I think we're already seeing an inkling of that with the executive order to create the SBR. But in terms of price, I would say that threshold is probably somewhere at I don't know, maybe 500,000 per Bitcoin, maybe 400,000 Bitcoin, somewhere there is where we start becoming the second largest asset class on the planet. And people can kind of directly compare gold at the top with, what is it, 20, 20 trillion, and Bitcoin with, half of that. And I think at that point you start to demonetize gold because, you have this new thing that is surpassing that 1,000-year monetary technology in 16, 17, 18 years. So that's when you start to shift and think, okay, I need exposure to this. I'm willing to dump my gold and buy some of this. And maybe gold is the only valuable thing a lot of people have left after, the dollar starts to hyperinflate or devalue even more. Because you have to imagine at that threshold, like, what does the world look like when Bitcoin is $500,000? It's a very different world than today, right? It's not 80, 90, 100, 108. It's a very radically different world. And I think people miss that mindset that things change as Bitcoin goes up in big chunks. Like 200, it's a very different world. From 200, 500, you just have to, double plus a little bit, right? And then from 500 to a million, it's just a double. So these things become more likely the higher we go because it's not like we're 10xing, we're just doubling from 500 at that Veblen threshold.
There are already central banks printing fiat to buy shares of MicroStrategy. Like they might not be allowed to buy Bitcoin, but I think the Central Bank of Norway and the Swiss Central Bank, they already hold MicroStrategy exposure, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah. Also, the Korean pension fund, one of the biggest in the world, has MicroStrategy now. But you see, like we're living in this echo chamber. We're actively searching for Bitcoin news. Normal people don't know this, but once they know it, it's going to be like the rush to buy toilet paper at Costco. You need it. You're worried that you don't have enough toilet paper, and it's going to be the same for Sats. It's just going to be a mad scramble to buy Sats.
Coins on exchanges, leaving the exchanges for the past 5 years. So for those who are unaware, for the first like 11 years of Bitcoin's life, coins were only sent to the exchanges. And you can see it's a clear trend for the first 11 years of Bitcoin's life. 2020 happened. Michael Saylor begins buying Bitcoin. Money printers get turned on globally. And there's like a clear inflection point. So for those who haven't seen the chart, for 5 years, coins have just been leaving the exchanges now. Are we seeing signs that we're kind of seeing this slow scramble for sats at the moment? And do you see any kind of inflection point in this trend where it begins to accelerate? Or do you think I'm just picking at straws here and, you know, maybe this trend will fade away?
Well, you are seeing the coins on exchange decline, right? And I think it'll just accelerate now with more corporate buys. And if there are nation state buys, like with Cynthia Lummis's bill, then that's just going to accelerate. And I don't think everyone fully understands the 21 million limit, right? Because we've grown up, well, when I say we, I mean everybody, we've grown up in a very fiat world where there's always wiggle room, right? With a fiat economy, you can always fix your mistake. Okay, like in Canada, maybe we spent too much on vaccines. Now we, print some more money. And printing doesn't necessarily mean money on a printing press. There are so many ways to print money, right? Issuing debt or monetizing debt. But, you can fix your mistake, right? We messed up. Well, we'll fix it. But with Bitcoin, there is no recourse. Just like you can't roll back the Bitcoin chain if there's a theft, right? You just can't print more. And that reality has not yet hit the general populace that, okay, there is only 21. And that number is dropping rapidly. Um, they don't know. Like, there's just never been anything like this before. Like, maybe gold, but still, like 2% inflation a year. And it can increase if there is demand. So it's like a different beast still compared to Bitcoin. And it takes a lot of going down the rabbit hole to really understand that ultimate scarcity, that it's just like hitting a wall. No one will help you get more Bitcoin because you can't. If you break down the Bitcoin pie, like maybe like 3-4 million coins might be lost, right? Maybe five on the higher end of the boundary, but a lot of coins were lost. You can't look at Bitcoin at the lens that you're looking at it today and understand that, people 10, 15 years ago understood it the same way. A lot of people just didn't care, or yeah, they just lost it and threw away the hard drive. And there's a lot of that. And that brings us down to, maybe 15, 16 million coins available. And Michael Saylor alone has taken off all the coins to be mined this year. Maybe twice, maybe more. And then you factor in any other significant buyer and you get a multiple of that. So it's likely that Bitcoin is already deflationary, right? Everything that's mined is not adding to the supply. So there is really little Bitcoin left. And I think all these dips, all the fear right now, if you think of things adversarially, then someone trying to accumulate a lot of Bitcoin would do well to make you think that, we're going to drop to 70 and, we're going to have a bear market so that you sell your coins to them because there's so little left. And, the price dips seem to convince maybe Bitcoiners with less conviction that, yeah, there's lots of Bitcoin too, because, whenever I post something like there's only 21 million, then there's always some guy retorting like, well, then why is the price going down? It's the price can go down because there's 2 million coins on exchanges that can be used to move the price up and down, and it's trading. So short term does not indicate what happens in the long term, and we know what the long term result is, that there is not enough Bitcoin for anybody.
And I mean, the price reflects that. Best performing asset in the world for 16 years. It's hard to argue with that. I think a lot of people are underestimating how valuable even fractions of a Bitcoin could be worth. Like, a lot of people look at the price of Bitcoin today. I don't know what it is, maybe 80,000. And I think, like you said earlier, people had hard drives full of Bitcoins, tens, if not hundreds of Bitcoins that they were mining in the early days that they just didn't really appreciate as much as they should have. And I think I feel like people are making the same mistake today. Like, one Bitcoin, even 10% of a Bitcoin today could be worth so much in the future.
Yeah, you just have to look at where everything's going and what's happening in the US. It's going to happen everywhere. And I think, again, it's necessity. If you look at Japan, they need to do something soon, right? Every country needs something because they should understand that a hard asset is something you want, right? If you have gold, you should have Bitcoin. And if you don't have gold, you should definitely have Bitcoin. Like Canada, we have no gold. So yeah, it's just going to take some time, but the nation state and government adoption is sort of a good indicator of normie Bitcoin understanding, right? So I would say using that indicator and the US developments in the last week, it seems like normies are beginning to understand, at least under my analysis.
Um, you mentioned Japan, which I thought was interesting. And you also mentioned the Korean pension fund has exposure to Bitcoin. Was it through MicroStrategy you said earlier in the chat? I
Yeah.
think we've also talked about Europe. So we've talked a lot about Europe. There's a lot of G7 nations in Europe. Does that mean you'd be more bullish on a country like Japan, maybe getting into Bitcoin than countries and big countries in Europe? I'm just trying to think for myself, who's the next big domino to fall? Is it China? Is it Russia? Should it be Japan? Or is it a European wild card that we're not thinking of?
Hard to say. It's really when do they when do they let their realization of reality take precedent over career risk and just inertia and also ability to affect change? Those are the main things, right? Like if you look at who else aside from the US needs Bitcoin, I would say China is a big one. But China adopting Bitcoin in a big way is just a bigger change overall. And I think it also applies a bit to Korea, right? Like there are capital controls in place. So if you want to adopt Bitcoin in a big way, you're going to have the people adopting it in a big way because the government adoption is a signal for people, not for Bitcoiners, right? But for your ordinary guy in the street, when he sees the government doing something, that's when they start to think, okay, maybe I should do that too, right? That's how come you have people blindly complying with things that are unconstitutional or whatever, right? They're just following the leader. So if let's say China did do some Bitcoin treasury strategy, you can bet that people would do it. But the problem is that there are capital controls still. So either the government has to remove the capital controls or they have to deal with this dichotomy where Bitcoin for me, but not for thee. And that's a recipe for disaster, right? And yeah, these things have to be reconciled eventually. So that's the challenge I see. But definitely China is in need of some economic engine to drive growth, right? I think everyone at this point in time is looking for that economic engine. Many countries are looking towards AI to be that economic engine, but gains from AI need to be stored in something valuable, right? Otherwise, you go back to Saylor's analogy of the melting ice cube. Yes, you have an economic engine of growth driven by AI. Maybe it's DeepSeek, maybe it's Manus or whatnot in China, but you're making money now and storing it in what? RMB. So yeah, there is no holistic solution yet that these countries have formulated that works, but they have to formulate it because China is in a difficult position economically, right? You have population decline, real estate markets are down, stock markets, equities are down. The money is becoming worthless. You're dealing with a trade war with the U.S. potentially, and there's just really nothing to drive economic growth. So once they figure out it is Bitcoin, then they have to kind of like adjust everything else to fit this. But I would say it's harder for some countries like China, but they need it definitely, right? It's the same case for Japan. Same economic constraints and problems, right? Um, Population decline, older population. You have to pay the pensions out in a money that's getting, worth less, and there's really no economic engine of growth. So it just comes down to when they realize it and they figure out how to adapt it. But there will be needing to have some restructuring of the whole system before it happens. But you can kind of see China's dipping their toe into it by blessing all the Bitcoin adoption in Hong Kong, right? Because Hong Kong can't really do that without a blessing from Beijing. So things are changing, but they're not there yet. So to answer your question, I don't know which country, but I know it's gonna come because it has to. There is no economic engine of growth other than Bitcoin.